Harold Ramis, Catherine O'Hara, and Martin Short together at Comic Relief in 1986. All three came from the Canadian and American improv theater tradition, with Ramis and Short connected to Second City. The benefit event brought comedians together to raise funds for homeless people across the United States. Jodie Foster skateboarding in the 1970s. Foster was already an established actress as a teenager, having been nominated for an Academy Award at age 14 for Taxi Driver. The image shows the relaxed side of a young woman growing up under the Hollywood spotlight who would later study literature at Yale. A franchise owner, his wife, and Ronald McDonald pose in front of a brand new McDonald's in 1971. During that decade, the chain expanded aggressively across the United States, and the clown character created in 1963 had already become one of the most recognized advertising figures among children worldwide. Marilyn Monroe photographed in 1962, the final year of her life. The actress would die that August at age 36, leaving the film Something's Got to Give unfinished. Her image became one of the most reproduced visual icons of the 20th century, enduring across generations as a symbol of glamour and fragility. Mexican actress Dolores Del Rio in the 1930s. After conquering Hollywood in an era of strong prejudice against Latino performers, Del Rio would return to Mexico in the 1940s to become one of the central figures of the so-called Golden Age of Mexican cinema, working with director Emilio Fernandez. Japanese singer and actor Kenji Sawada photographed in 1978. Known as Julie, Sawada was one of Japan's greatest pop idols in the 1970s, first with the band The Tigers and later as a solo artist. His androgynous and theatrical aesthetic deeply influenced Japanese pop visual culture in the decades that followed. In 1926, Bette Davis became the first woman to work as a lifeguard in Ogunquit, Maine. Years before transforming into one of the greatest actresses in Hollywood history and winning 2 Academy Awards, Davis already displayed the determination to break barriers that would define her entire professional trajectory. Salvador Dalí draws Raquel Welch in 1965. The Spanish surrealist painter and the American actress met for a session in which Dalí produced a portrait of her. Welch was at the beginning of her rise as a sex symbol of the decade, while Dalí was already a global celebrity for both his art and his eccentric behavior. A NACA human computer uses a slide rule beside a Friden adding machine in 1951. Before electronic computers, entire teams of mathematicians, largely women, manually performed the aeronautical calculations that made the American space race possible in the decades that followed the Second World War. Welsh boxer Joe Calzaghe displays his belts in the late 1990s, boasting a record of 46 wins and no defeats. Calzaghe defeated his entire division across more than a decade as super middleweight champion, including victories over major names, and retired from the sport completely undefeated in professional boxing. Welsh singer Bonnie Tyler photographed in the 1970s. Her distinctive raspy voice resulted from vocal cord surgery performed in 1976. Tyler would achieve worldwide fame the following decade with Total Eclipse of the Heart, one of the best-selling singles in the history of international popular music. J. Robert Oppenheimer, lecturing at Kyoto University in Japan in 1960. The physicist who led the Manhattan Project and developed the atomic bomb, visited the country whose cities were destroyed by the weapon he helped create, an episode charged with profound moral and historical complexity in his biography. Lou Reed, with his co-workers at Pickwick Records in 1965. Before founding the Velvet Underground and revolutionizing rock music, Reed worked as a staff songwriter producing disposable pop songs in bulk. It was at this job that he met John Cale, with whom he would form the most influential underground band. Johnny Cash in 1978 at the Carter Center with his iconic opening greeting. The phrase with which Cash began his shows became one of the most recognizable introductions in American music. During that period, the Man in Black was a national institution respected far beyond the boundaries of traditional country. Salvador Dali beside Raquel Welch in 1965. The meeting between the surrealist master and the young American actress produced memorable images. Dali cultivated relationships with celebrities and fed his own public persona as much as his artwork, becoming himself a kind of permanent artistic performance. View near the Sahara Hotel in Las Vegas in 1973. The Sahara was one of the classic casinos on the Strip, opened in 1952 and frequented by Frank Sinatra's Rat Pack. In the 1970s, Las Vegas was transitioning from the glamour of the Sinatra era to the mega resorts that would define the city in later decades. Ewan McGregor, Jake Lloyd, and Liam Neeson behind the scenes of Star Wars: The Phantom Menace in 1998. The film marked the franchise's return after 16 years and generated some of the highest expectations in cinema history, though critical reception proved far more divided than its enormous box office results. Bonnie Tyler and Robert Sullivan on their wedding day in 1973. The couple remained together for 53 years, a rare longevity in the entertainment world. Tyler repeatedly credited the stability of her marriage as one of the factors that allowed her to weather the turbulence of a decades-long international career. Debbie Harry, photographed in New York in 1992. The lead singer of Blondie, Harry was a central figure in the New York punk and new wave scene that emerged at CBGB in the 1970s. In the 1990s, she maintained a solo career and acted in film before the band's return to commercial success later that decade. Models Kate Moss and Joe Wood at Mick Jagger's 50th birthday party in 1997. The event gathered the elite of British music and fashion. Moss was at the peak of her fame as the face of the heroin chic movement, while Joe Wood was married to Ronnie Wood, guitarist for the Rolling Stones since the mid-1970s. Two men walk in Korea in 1904, the year the Russo-Japanese War began, fought largely on Korean territory. The conflict would result in Japanese victory and the establishment of a protectorate over Korea in 1905, a prelude to the formal annexation of the country by Japan 5 years afterward in 1910. Star Trek fans gathered at the San Diego Comic-Con in 1973. The convention had been founded just 4 years earlier and was still a modest event. Star Trek fans were fundamental in creating convention culture, having even managed to save the series from cancellation through organized letter-writing campaigns. Fidel Castro on his wedding day in 1948, when he married Mirta Diaz-Balart. Castro was then a 22-year-old law student at the University of Havana, still far from the revolution he would lead a decade later. The marriage would end in divorce in 1955 during his exile in Mexico before the revolution. Men in Zambia observed the total solar eclipse of June 21, 2001. The phenomenon crossed southern Africa and attracted thousands of observers and scientists to the continent. It was the first total eclipse of the new millennium, and its path of totality crossed Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Madagascar. The Beastie Boys in the back booth of the taproom section at the Hamburger Hamlet on Sunset Boulevard, a hangout frequented by the hair metal bands of the era. The New York trio had broken from their punk roots to become one of hip-hop's most inventive groups, mixing sampling, rock, and irreverent humor. Surfers in suits for the Save the Surf campaign in San Diego in 1961. The movement to preserve waves and public beach access began organizing in California during that period, anticipating by years the founding of the Surfrider Foundation and the environmental activism that would define surf culture. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Hugh Hefner, and Wilt Chamberlain at the Playboy Mansion in 1977. Schwarzenegger was coming off the success of the documentary Pumping Iron. Chamberlain was one of the greatest players in basketball history, and Hefner presided over the publishing empire that defined much of American male culture. Waylon Jennings visits the Ensworth School in Nashville on May 2, 1985, playing a guitar for the students. Jennings was one of the creators of the outlaw country movement, which broke from Nashville's polished sound and returned creative autonomy to artists, profoundly influencing American country music. Al Roker, at age 33, in 1988. The American meteorologist had already worked in television for more than a decade and would become, a few years later, one of the most recognized figures on American morning television with The Today Show, a position he would hold for more than 30 consecutive years at NBC. The Undertaker and Macho Man Randy Savage in conversation in 1994. Both were major stars of American professional wrestling during the height of the WWF era. The Undertaker was building one of the most enduring characters in sports entertainment history, while Savage was known for his charisma and unmistakable voice. Gina Lollobrigida and Marilyn Monroe photographed together in 1954. The meeting brought together two of the greatest female stars of world cinema at the time, one Italian and one American. Lollobrigida was the face of post-war European cinema and would later abandon acting to devote herself to photography and sculpture. Whitney Houston's passport photo from the early 1980s before her rise to worldwide stardom. Houston had worked as a teenage model and sang in church choirs in New Jersey. Her 1985 debut album would become the best-selling debut record by a solo female artist up to that point in music history. Andre the Giant relaxes in a hot tub in 1986. The French wrestler, who stood 7 feet 4 inches tall and suffered from acromegaly, was one of the greatest attractions in world wrestling and was immortalized in cinema as Fezzik in The Princess Bride. He died in 1993 at age 46, leaving an immense cultural legacy. Celebration of the 300th anniversary of the reunification of Ukraine and Russia in Kiev, 1954. The event marked the 1654 Treaty of Pereyaslav and was used by the Soviet Union as propaganda of fraternal unity. That same year, Crimea was administratively transferred from Russia to Soviet Ukraine. Seated on an unexploded 16-inch naval shell, U.S. Marine PFC Raymond L. Hubert shakes his head at the danger. Munitions that failed to detonate were a constant threat on Pacific battlefields, requiring specialized teams for their safe neutralization long after the fighting in an area had ended. The legendary session bassist and guitarist Carol Kaye, around 1970. Kaye played on more than 10,000 recordings, including classics by the Beach Boys, Ray Charles, and numerous film and television soundtracks. She was a central member of the Los Angeles session collective known as the Wrecking Crew. Chaka Khan photographed in 1976 when she was fronting the band Rufus. Her powerful voice and extraordinary vocal range made her one of the most respected singers in funk and R&B. In the 1980s, her solo career would bring hits such as I Feel For You, written by Prince, cementing her international fame. Julia Roberts photographed in 1990, the year Pretty Woman transformed her into Hollywood's biggest female star. The film grossed more than $460 million and earned her an Academy Award nomination. Roberts would become the highest-paid actress in the world throughout the decade that followed that release. In the late 1960s, while still a teenager, Christopher Walken worked as a lion tamer in a traveling circus. The unusual experience preceded his career in theater and later in film, where he would build one of the most distinctive trajectories of his generation with an unmistakable speaking style and presence. Canadian sniper H.A. Marshall photographed in Belgium in 1944. Marshall was one of the most effective marksmen in the Canadian forces during the Northwest European campaign of the Second World War, serving in the liberation of Belgium and the Netherlands after the Allied landings in Normandy. Joe Frazier, heading to the after-party following his defeat of Muhammad Ali in 1971 in what was called the Fight of the Century at Madison Square Garden. It was Ali's first professional loss, and Frazier knocked him down in the 15th round. The bout was among the most watched sporting events of the century. Jim Thorpe, or Watho Hook, meaning bright path, photographed in 1912. A member of the Sac and Fox Nation, Thorpe is considered one of the greatest American athletes of all time, having won the pentathlon and decathlon at the Stockholm Olympics and played professional football and baseball afterward. Adam and the Ants in 1981, the year the band dominated the British charts with the album Kings of the Wild Frontier. Adam Ant built a spectacular visual aesthetic, mixing references to pirates, dandies, and Native Americans, becoming one of the first great icons of the MTV music video era. Woody Guthrie before a performance in the 1940s. The composer of This Land Is Your Land, Guthrie was the musical voice of the Great Depression and of American migrant workers. His guitar bore the inscription that the machine killed fascists, and he would directly influence Bob Dylan and generations after. Children of Aboriginal shearers from the 1880s ride their orphan lamb, called a poddy, in Walgett, Australia. The image documents the presence of Aboriginal families on sheep stations in the Australian interior, where they frequently worked under conditions of extreme exploitation and without fair compensation. Elvis Presley photographed on December 6, 1957. That was Elvis's last year before being drafted into military service in March 1958. That same December, he was recording the soundtrack for the film King Creole, considered by many critics to be his finest work in the cinema during his entire career. Sylvester Stallone and Devin DeVasquez preparing lunch in 1988. The model dated Stallone during that period, at a time when the actor was living the height of his international fame following the Rocky series and the Rambo films, making him one of the most photographed figures in American celebrity press. Diana Ross finishing a rib on Bessemer Street in Alabama in 1997. The singer, former leader of the Supremes and one of Motown's greatest voices, appears in an everyday and unpretentious moment, far from the glamour of the stages she occupied for more than 3 decades as one of American music's most successful artists. Cher exits one of her Rolls-Royces in 1971, accompanied by Sonny Bono. The duo, Sonny and Cher, were then at the peak of their popularity with a variety show on American television. The couple would separate in 1975, and Cher would go on to build one of the longest-running solo careers in world pop music. A 13-year-old Chinese soldier captured on November 23, 1944, photographed by an American reporter. The Second Sino-Japanese War forced the conscription of adolescents and children into Chinese ranks. The conflict, begun in 1937, caused tens of millions of deaths before the Japanese surrender in 1945.